Number one, there needs to be representation. It is important for Black males, especially in their middle school, high school years, is to see someone who looks like them. It's important for these individuals to be able to visualize themselves beyond where they are. I wanted more for myself. I wanted more for my children. I wanted more for my family. And that made me constantly always pursue opportunities to further improve myself.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to the You Belong in Here podcast. This is a podcast where we explore the intersection of nursing and racism, racial disparities that African Americans face in healthcare, as well as the inequities that African American nurses, doctors, and nurse practitioners face in the workplace. My name is Dr. Tiffany C. Brown, and I am your host. I am a doctoral level nurse practitioner with more than 23 years of practice in the nursing profession. It is my hope that through hearing the personal stories of triumph and resiliency shared through in-depth interviews from nurses, nurse practitioners, doctors, and DEI experts, you will be empowered in your workplace and know that you belong in here. Now, let's get to our show. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of You Belong in Here. Again, my name is Dr. Tiffany C. Brown, and I am your host. I am so thrilled to introduce you to my guest for today's episode that I titled Breaking Barriers, a first-generation male nurse's path to leadership. So listen, if you're someone who is currently or was in the past a first-generation college student, then I know you will be able to relate to this episode. So let's get into it and let me tell you a bit about my guest. Mr. Dr. Jones has been a registered nurse for over 25 years and has served in various capacities across the healthcare spectrum, which includes his current role as an inaugural Associate Dean for Culture Engagement and Professional Development, as well as an Associate Clinical Professor for the East Carolina University College of Nursing. Dr. Jones also leads the East Carolina University College of Nursing Advancement Office. His research interests focus on community-based care, men's health, health disparity elimination, and population health. He was the recipient of the 2023 Faculty Scholar Grant Award by the Foundation of Academic Nursing and is a co-founder of the Network of Black Male Nurse Leaders, which is designed to empower Black male nurses across the country by providing a robust support system, offering mentorship opportunities, and advocating for professional growth. So that's big, y'all. So let's give it up for Dr. Jones, everyone. Dr. Jones, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Thank you for inviting me to take part in this interview to share my experience.
Wonderful. So, as everyone who knows me knows, I kind of like to start with what I call a genesis of your beginning, right? So do you mind sharing a bit about your upbringing, as far as your background in Mississippi and how your historical values shaped your identity?
Yeah, and as you alluded to it, I am a native of Mississippi. Spent the first 45 years of my life there until I moved to North Carolina in 2023. Had very humble beginnings, born to a mother and a father who were both born as children of sharecroppers there in Mississippi. My mom worked at a sewing factory. My dad worked for the Head Start program where he was a mechanic. I have a huge family there. Just within my generation is 29 grandkids, and that's just on my mom's side. My mom has 8 siblings. I have 3 sisters and a whole wealth of nieces, nephews, great nieces and nephews. I think if I could sum up, my life history has greatly prepared me for where I am now. And I like to tell individuals that I started from an associate degree in nursing. And, I now have a PhD in nursing. And I am truly honored to sit in a space to where I can educate the next generation of nurses and also healthcare administration leaders.
Awesome, because we definitely need that, especially in our African American community. The African male population, which is something I'm going to get into right now, actually. It's no surprise that research shows that Black male nurses are significantly underrepresented within the nursing workforce, with, I think, estimations of maybe less than up to 1% in representation. Given this, what inspired you to personally pursue a career in nursing, and especially as I understand it, a first generation college student?
I think there are 2 things that must occur. Number one, there needs to be representation. So as Black males, it is important for Black males, especially in their middle school, or even elementary school, elementary through high school years, is to see someone who looks like them. You know, it's important for these individuals to be able to visualize themselves beyond where they are at one in one particular time. And then, secondly, it's important for us to have individuals around us who will keep us motivated. And I like to give credit to three individuals. Number one, it was my mom, who believed in education. You know, she didn't have the opportunity to get a college education herself. Secondly, my grandmother, who was really big on education. She actually wanted me to be a medical doctor. I know I couldn't give her a medical doctor, but she lived long enough to see me give her a PhD. Even though I could not give her a doctor, I knew not getting an education was not an option for me. I had to get that education beyond high school. I mean, she just valued getting an education and work. That was always one of the things that she wanted us to do, was to have a good job and to get an education. And she would often tell us, go ahead and get it all. And I think my mom and my grandmother motivating me put some fire under me that's still in place today. Back in Leake County, Mississippi. So at that time, we had what they call vocational technical centers. And so those vocational technical centers could teach you things like carpentry, auto mechanics. They could teach you business, how to be a work in business as an administrative assistant or secretary, as they called them at that time. They would teach the young ladies or men, if they wanted to, how to sew, that type thing. And because my dad was a mechanic for the Head Start program, fixing buses and so forth, and he was like a shade tree mechanic as well. He fixed people's cars for him and all that good stuff. I thought I wanted to be a mechanic, but there was a guidance counselor, who's that third important person there at the Votech Center, that I would spend a lot of time with. I think her, my mom, and my grandmother saw something in me that I really didn't see in myself. And she gave me an assessment, and that assessment kind of gauged, based upon what my answers were. I can't remember, it's been almost 30 years ago. Based upon what my answers are, what career path I should take. And it said that I should either be a nurse or registered nurse or a teacher. She convinced me to pursue nursing as a career focus, and I didn't have money, and I know that I would not be able to give my grandmother a doctor. So I tried nursing, and I said if I did not succeed in nursing, I would fall back on teaching. So 25 years later as a nurse, I have not had to fall back on teaching, having an education degree, but I think I have actually done both. So I am a teacher now in nursing academia as well as a nurse. But I think at that time it meant, high school teacher or elementary teacher or something like that. But I did not realize that I would actually be doing both almost some 30 years later. But it was those three people in my life that really motivated me to pursue a higher education, and I think it's important too to help for individuals to be around us, to help us to really focus or pinpoint where we need to go. Because I think sometimes individuals kind of flounder for years in college, not knowing what they really want to do. But I had folk around me who helped me to narrow in. That's why I have been in the profession that I love for so long. I think I had a really sound foundation that was set for me.
That is wonderful. I really love how you tie into your role models, in a sense, bringing it back to your foundation. And I want to say this: you did give your grandmother a doctor, Dr. Michael Jones, okay?
Yeah,
And something else that you kind of hint to, too, is living out your dreams of your family, right?
absolutely.
In a lot of ways, we first generation college students, because I am one myself as
Yeah,
well, we live out the dreams of our ancestors or our parents,
yeah,
And I kind of want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges and barriers within the first generation college students have, but I would say just for myself personally, and you can let me know if this is you too, that can be a little bit of a weight,
absolutely.
that you carry. There's the expectations that the family may put on you. Like you said, your grandmother always wanted you to be a doctor, right?
Absolutely.
But we'll get into this, right? But financially, there's a decision that had to be made. Like, can I spend 400, $500,000 on medical
Yeah.
school? So yeah, let me go on a little bit. I want to talk about a study that I read that has shown that first generation African American college students, they face unique challenges related to their race and the first generation status, and it can include academia, finances, social, and mental health hurdles. These challenges can stem from limited access to qualify for pre-college education. There's the financial constraints, and then there's lack of representation
Mhm.
in the academic curricula,
Absolutely.
as well as discrimination on campus, right?
Absolutely.
So, Dr. Jones, for you as a first generation college student, what would you say were some of the biggest challenges you faced on your educational journey?
25 years into my nursing career, and several years into nurse academia. The last 5 years have been spent in academia as a leader, which, we may talk about it later, but there's so few of us in nursing academia, African Americans who are in leadership roles. Sometimes those numbers can't be enumerated. It's not, much research out there in that area, but I don't want to get on that soapbox. But I think for me, I've started to come to the realization that a lot of barriers that I faced early in my career, early in my educational journey, was self-inflicted barriers.
Mm.
I think sometimes when we don't believe in ourselves, like I said, my mom, that guidance counselor, my grandmother actually saw something in me that I did not see in myself. To this day, I'm a very introverted person. A lot of times I will compare myself to others still, 5 degrees later, 2 certificates later. I still find myself not, well, questioning myself or doubting my own abilities. And I think what that did was it kind of manifested itself in whether or not I would pursue certain things or I would actually talk myself out of doing certain things. I think another barrier for me was, we often tell students when they're in nursing school not to work. So it's important to focus on your schooling 100%. So a barrier for me was, my mom and dad, were not able to, pay for my college. So early on in the years, I had to depend on Pell Grants. Then there came a point where I didn't qualify for Pell Grants for one reason or another. So I had to work during my years in nursing school. Throughout those 2 years of getting my associate degree at the community college there in Mississippi, so I worked at Walmart for half of that time, and I worked at a little grocery store called Piggly Wiggly, starting out from age 16 up until age 21 when I was in nursing school. And that created a huge barrier for me because there was limited time that I had for studying. And actually, I failed my very first semester of nursing school because, having to work and so forth. And then again, here comes two other faculty members that were there in that community college, and I like to call their names. Is Mrs. Sandra Cross, who was an African American instructor there at Meridian Community College, as well as Dr. Yvonne Alliance, who was also an instructor there when I was in that program. I was the only black male in the program, and these two ladies actually took me under their wings, served as mentors for me. They were my accountability partners that I needed, and I still am in contact with them today via social media, and I often share, what I've done in my career. And I know you didn't ask that question, but I thought I would throw in kind of equalizer for me as I faced that barrier of having the limited resources and trying to navigate nursing school. And I think a third barrier for me, of course, being in Mississippi. Mississippi has its history, being a black male in spaces where we were not as numerous as we are now. There comes the microaggressions, implicit bias, those types of things. I think that we all have to navigate. But I think the biggest thing, in hindsight is even with all of what society has to throw at us, if we don't believe in ourselves, I think that is the biggest barrier of all. Because there are some things in our society we won't be able to change, but if we're not able to navigate through those things, sometimes I often tell myself I have to get up early and stay late just to get to the bare minimum. If we don't understand that, if we don't believe in ourselves, there's nothing that we will be able to accomplish. And I think, I've started to kind of twist that, now later on in my career. I consider myself seasoned now, 25 years in. If I don't believe in myself and I don't push myself, there's nothing that I will be able to do and be successful at it.
Amen to that. That's what I feel like I should say after your comment. I could not agree with you more. I heard several things that I would like to highlight. You mentioned, number one, you talked about the importance of mentorship, to a
Absolutely.
certain aspect, and having people in your corner that actually want to see you succeed as well. And helping you to do that. And something that we don't talk about, because I also had to work, while I was in college. We don't talk about the people, well, not enough about, or shine light on those who are working students,
Absolutely.
undergraduate in the undergraduate program. I agree with you. I was born and raised my parents were not able to afford to without any parent loan. They did take out a parent
Mhm.
loan, I think the first year, but then after that it was on me. All those loans was in my name, and then I also had to work. It was hard,
Mhm.
but it is doable,
Absolutely.
and that is a mindset, and it
Yep.
is tough I think we have the same number of years under our belt,
Yep.
25, going to school 20 years ago in your 20s and trying to manage your time with studying and trying to manage your time with schoolwork. It's a challenge, for that balance.
Yep.
And you did mention you happened to fail, your first semester. And thank you for saying that. So for those who are listening and you are struggling right now,
Absolutely.
you're in
Mhm.
school, you're struggling. Dr. Jones failed his first semester, and looking now, he's Dr. Jones with numerous degrees. So, you can do it too. And one failure does not mean it's the end for you. But share with those how you overcame, some of those challenges. I know who helped you, but
Mhm.
how do you feel mentally you got yourself in the mindset to overcome them?
My mom,
Hmm.
my mom was the type of person, she doesn't like, being around her complaining and crying, all that type of stuff. I think we had a very short conversation because I was still living at home at that time, and my grandmother too, well, what you gonna do? Get up and keep on moving. And so, I tell individuals, have people around you who are strong folks, because I think it's important for you to gain from those individuals who have that, who are strong within themselves. My mom is probably the strongest person that I know, with all she had to go through to raise, all five of us that she raised. But I think, and then too, for me, I've always been kind of stubborn. If I set my mind to do something, I do it. I knew that nursing was what I wanted to do. And actually, what I did was, so I was going to end up being a nurse either way, because guess what? I applied to another program, had gotten accepted into that program at another community college. It was an LPN program. Either way, I was going to be a nurse. But I think having that stubbornness about myself, and my mom, not taking no for an answer, and she always rejected to the word can't. I got back up and I tried again. But I think what I would say for others, if it is really something that you want to do, don't let anything stop you. Hear what I said? I say, okay, if I'm not going to succeed here, there are 100 other community colleges throughout the state of Mississippi at that time. So I applied to another school, got admitted, because I wanted to have that as a backup plan just in case. But I was able to get back into that program. But I think it was because I had folk around me who were pushing, and motivating me to pursue, what I wanted to do. And even in my career over the last 25 years as a nurse, I've had a lot of setbacks, but at the same time, I have a very small but mighty circle around me who keep me motivated. And I'm one of those persons too. Even as a younger person, I always like to tell people I was a very old soul, in my 20s, because of life experiences, and I knew that I was not going to let anything stop me from getting from point A, to point B.
Excellent. What I'm hearing is resiliency, of course,
Absolutely.
you know,
Mm.
and we are a resilient people,
Yep. Yep.
I want to mention, given you mentioned before that the number of African American males in nursing, or specifically male nurse leaders, is unquantifiable,
Yep.
right? Now we're trying to quantify it as much as we can. Can you describe for those who may be interested in that path to leadership, what it was like for you? What steps did you take to advance your career?
African American males make up 0.67 of the nursing workforce right now. That's very low. It's less than 1%.
Yeah,
The number of African American males who are in leadership roles, that's across the board. That's just not in academia. That's in research, that's in education, that's administration. That number cannot be enumerated. We don't know. It's so few of us. It's way less than 1%. So my journey into leadership started when I was a shift manager. I was 3 years into my career. I graduated nursing school in 2000. By 2003, I had my first leadership role working at a rehab facility there in Jackson, Mississippi. So we did spinal cord orthopedic rehab at this rehabilitation center. Mrs. Susan Myrick at that time saw something in me as well. Saw leadership characteristics in me, gave me my first role in nursing leadership, which was a shift manager. Stayed there for about 3 years on a full-time basis. Decided I wanted to do something else. And so for me, I've always kind of thought big, and I'm one of those types of people who kind of follows my heart. My heart was no longer in bedside nursing. I burned out. So I took a role working for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi at that time, working for a Medicare contractor as an educator. Now that wasn't a leadership role, but that kind of set me up for my next leadership role. And for me, I'm always that person who thinks outside of the box. I knew that I wanted to be a healthcare administrator. I knew bedside nursing was not going to be for me long term for that position. And I think for my life, I don't consider myself a religious person, but I do consider myself a deeply spiritual person because I'm actually driven by, a higher power, and where my heart is, I follow my heart. And I'm a firm believer that things in life happens for a reason. Well, I did not stay at that position very long. I stayed at that position for about a year. So I started in January, left there in September. I knew that job was being eliminated, so I was going to be laid off. So I was looking through the Clarion Ledger, which is a newspaper there in Jackson, Mississippi, and there was a position for a clinical coordinator at an organization called Mississippi Primary Healthcare Association. And what they did was they actually was kind of the conglomerate or the membership organization for the 21 community health centers there in Mississippi. They needed a clinical coordinator. That was my second leadership role because I was able to work with the physicians that worked in the community health centers across the state of Mississippi, ensuring that they had what they needed, providing educational opportunities for them at that time. And that was in 2006. So, kind of take a step back around 2005. Before then, Hurricane Katrina had kind of decimated some of the Gulf states like Mississippi, Alabama, Texas. The University of Mississippi Medical Center, Mississippi State Department of Health, and the Mississippi Primary Healthcare Association there received a grant, and the purpose of that grant was to pull all of the healthcare organizations who provided care to the poor and underserved to where they could come together and develop a mechanism by which they could ensure access to primary care throughout the state because Hurricane Katrina just had everything in a disarray. Patients didn't know where to go, and the poor and underserved suffered the most. So those three organizations that I named, the Primary Care Association, University of Mississippi Medical Center, the Mississippi State Department of Health, those county clinics, and we know what the health department clinics do. So they formed an initiative called Healthy Linkages, and Healthy Linkages was designed to bring those three entities together as a united front to build partnerships. They needed a person to lead that organization, needed a director. So I applied for that position. That was my third leadership role in healthcare spaces. And that came because of what had happened previously. So you see things stacking on to each other. So took that job. That job was actually with the University of Miss Medical Center. So I went in that position as a manager of Healthy Linkages. I was then promoted to director of Healthy Linkages. And ultimately, I became the chief community health officer there in the University of Mississippi Medical Center. Stayed there for about 8 years. In addition to that, I was also the deputy director for the Merle Evers Williams Institute for the elimination of health disparities. While I was there working, both at the University of Mississippi Medical Center as well as the Mississippi Primary Healthcare Association, I developed a passion for caring for the poor and underserved. And again, 8 years into working there for the University of Mississippi Medical Center, which is where that Healthy Linkages position was based, I felt the calling again to pursue other things. I felt like I had been there long enough. I didn't see where I was growing. There was a position available for an associate director for Optum, which is under the umbrella of United Health Group. And that position was basically overseeing a case management team that cared for or provided case management for Medicaid beneficiaries. Again, the poor and underserved is where my passion was. I went there, I led a group, or I led a team of case managers in Mississippi. I had Louisiana at one time. When I left there in 2019, I had Mississippi and California. So I had managed teams of case managers and community health workers for about 3 years when I stayed there. Got another call, another opportunity came up. I went and worked at an organization called Molina. Um, and in that position, I was promoted to associate vice president. And in that role, I had oversight of the IT component of it, the informatics component of it, claims there. Well, I was in that position for about 9 months, and I was let go from that position from what I feel was probably working for a company where I don't think that it was a true match for my integrity. I felt was had to compromise my integrity a lot working for that particular company. Ineffective leadership, I think there, I did not have the mentorship that I feel like I needed in that role. I had some reservations about going. I did it anyway and ended up not staying there long. So this was around COVID, 2020. It was around COVID. At that time, I was also wrapping up my PhD at Hampton University. So I lost that job on March 6th. By March 25th, I had defended my dissertation to become Dr. Michael Jones. That was around COVID at that time. And then I decided I did not want to go back into healthcare administration at all. I said, okay, I got this PhD. I want to go into academia. Then there was a position for a coordinator for the entry level Master of Science in Nursing program at Brenau University, which was in Norcross, Georgia. Mind you, this is about 6 hours away from where I was living there in Mississippi. So I would make that drive between Mississippi and Norcross, Georgia on a weekly basis. I went there to start that entry level Master of Science program, which was designed to target individuals who had a bachelor's degree in a different discipline.
Mhm.
And after 5 semesters, they could get a master's degree in nursing to become a nurse. So I went there to start that program. I was promoted to chair of graduate nursing. I went there in 2020. By 2021, I had been promoted to chair. So I stayed there for about 3 years, started that program, oversaw the nurse practitioner program, DNP program. There was a position at AACN that I saw that I applied to. In that role, I knew that there were people, out on LinkedIn. And at that time, I was really active on LinkedIn. And I reached out to this individual, just cold turkey, say, hey, do you know about this position here at AACN? Can you tell me about it? He and I talked on the phone and I didn't get the position ultimately, but and I told him what my interests were. And he was, oh, by the way, we have a position at East Carolina University College of Nursing that you may be a good fit for. You should apply. So I applied. So that was in late 2022. I applied, went through the interview process. By March 2023, I was sitting in the seat that I'm sitting in right now as an associate dean for culture engagement and professional development. And I took the long route to share all of that just to see how life experiences can pull us out of one situation and push us to where we need to be. And I did not mention too. So in June of 2020, show how life's trials and tribulations, as my Baptist folk back in Mississippi would say. My son, who was age 11 at that time, suffered a pediatric stroke due to an arterial venous malformation called an AVM. And so I spent a lot of time not working, during that phase of him being in the hospital, recuperating. So for about a year and a half, I had to I took a huge pay cut. I was not making nearly what I was making when I was at, working for those two health insurance. That, put a fire under me as well, that I wanted more for myself. I wanted more for my children. I wanted more for my family. And that made me constantly always pursue opportunities to further improve myself. So that's kind of been my long road. I always tell folks it's kind of a winding road with a lot of detours, from starting with an associate degree in nursing to ultimately earn a PhD in nursing, starting from a shift manager to now being an associate dean for the largest nursing school in the state of North Carolina.
What a wonderful journey. Thank you so much for sharing your story into the leadership. Now in academia, which, a couple things I feel that I heard:
Yeah.
passion and purpose,
Mhm.
right? They go together. And I think at the end of the day, no matter what your path is, where you started, just continue to have that passion for what it is you want to do, and you have to pursue it.
Absolutely.
Like it's biblical statement would be faith without works is dead. You
Absolutely.
have to put some action to that pursuit of the passion. So thank you so much for sharing that. I do want to ask you, now that you're in academia,
Mhm.
um, and you do have an influence of the next generation of nurses, what particularly would you want to see? How do you feel like your role now influences them,
Mhm.
particularly specifically the underrepresented backgrounds, as far as your clinical associate professor, your chief, positions at the school now?
So I am the representation that these young people need to see. And I think for me, I give them my real self. I don't give them Michael L. Jones, PhD. I don't give them that. I give them the little country poor boy from Mississippi. I attempt to put myself on their level so that they can see that, if I could make it, they could too. They could too. And I think sometimes as leaders, we often like to not own where we come from. And I think for me, that's who I am, and that's who individuals that I serve. And I think of it, I see it as service. That's who they need to see, that I need to put myself in a position where they are now so that they can see, okay, here's what you had to go through. That's why I always shared the fact that I failed my very first semester of nursing school. And I think for me, not only being that representation, but also being in a position to make decisions that I feel is needed as well. If, for example, if there's an opportunity to hire someone, we have to be very intentional about who we hire in roles, or who we partner with in certain roles, so that representation, being a decision maker, and also always serving in that role to educate. And it's important that we educate to underserved or underrepresented populations what it takes to get to a place where I am now, what it takes to get a PhD in nursing. What are the avenues into nursing? I think a lot of folk think that, okay, the only avenue into nursing is either become an LPN, either become a nurse through the ADN program at a community college, or go to a traditional BSN program. If, for example, if I can't make it in my nursing program where I'm now, I failed out of that program. Don't turn your back on the nursing profession, because if you can get that bachelor's degree in English, that bachelor's degree in public health, or something like that, you can get into an accelerated program to become a nurse. And I think for me, trying to find a way to not only say what a person can't do, but to give them options of what different avenues. And I feel like that's part of my role, as well as I'm working to serve and attract other folk from underrepresented populations like myself.
Absolutely. I want to talk briefly, because I know we're coming close on time. Actually, we're probably at time, but can you share a little bit more about your involvement with the network of Black male nurses? Because I want us to hear about this so people know that this is available to them. So share about your involvement, particularly its significance to you professionally, personally, educationally, all those things. Tell us
Yeah.
more about it.
So the genesis of the network of Black male nurse leaders started at lunch at Cracker Barrel in Wilson, North Carolina. So here in North Carolina, we are fortunate to have 5 PhD prepared Black male nurses. Dr. Bimbola Akantade, who's the dean here at ECU. We have Reverend, don't tell him I said it, Dr. Ernest Grant, who was the first male president of the American Nurse Association. Dr. Derek Glimpf, and also Dr. Michael Carey. The three of them are there at Duke. Dr. Akantade and myself are here at ECU, and so we often try to find ways of staying connected. They're in the Triangle areas we call it, which is the Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill area. Dr. Akantade and I are here in Greenville, North Carolina, so we found a common meeting place. And over lunch, we got to talking about several things around our profession, and we got into a discussion about the low number of African American males that are in profession, especially those who are in leadership. We were like, well, we don't know who these guys are. Where are they? We need to create a list. So it actually started as a list. We, put a call out on LinkedIn, leveraging that to reach a wider audience. We developed a survey to where we could get the names of these individuals, where they are, what their degree is, what field are they working in. For example, are they administrators? Are they in academia? And things just kind of started to snowball as we began to get information. And then we decided, hey, we need to create a space where these young men can come and learn. We need to create networking opportunities. We need to share our lived experiences, our best practices for success, and most importantly, establish mentorship where these young men are across the country. To date, we have about 90 respondents to that survey, and we have folk all over the country. We have a couple that follow us on LinkedIn that are actually on the continent of Africa that follows our work, and things just kind of started to happen naturally. Now we have what we call brother to brother, where we have black male nurse leaders or black male nurses who will come and they will do a lecture every third Thursday, I believe, of every month. And we've done this since October of 2024. We are looking to have a summit to where we can have a huge gathering of black male um, nurses across the country. We are also looking at forming more formalized mentorships where these individuals are, which is one of the reasons why we collected this data. For example, if there's someone in Mississippi where I come from that needs a mentor and there's someone who wants to mentor, we can link those two individuals together for what we hope a very productive relationship. Um, we're at a point now where we're actually beginning to form a board for our organization, so that we can expand. We can pursue grant dollars, that type of thing. But if anyone wants to join us, they can actually do a search on LinkedIn to Network of Black Male Nurse Leaders, and it'll have information there about how to take the survey. It'll have information about the 5 founders of our organization. But that's how we started, and that's kind of where we are right now. We've published 2 articles that kind of tells our story as well, and that information can also be found on our LinkedIn page.
Awesome. I will put these things in the show notes as well so that my listeners and viewers will be able to find that information.
Right.
Well, as we close up and wrap up, I want to ask you what would you say maybe one pearl of wisdom that you hope to convey to listeners about the importance of diversity in healthcare and the impact of Black male nurses?
I think for me, persistence is everything. Don't let anyone stop you. Get a mentor, and if you're in a place of leadership, if you're seasoned like I am, be proactive and go out and seek out a mentor. And also, and one of the things that my boss tells me often is, even if you are a mentee seeking a mentor, it's equally important for that mentee to actually drive that relationship as well. As my parents and grandparents would say back in Mississippi, closed mouth doesn't get fed, does not get fed. So be proactive, seek out. Don't be afraid to, network. Don't be afraid to reach out to that person who's in a leadership role and you see them on LinkedIn. If you don't have a LinkedIn page, I think it's having a LinkedIn account and being active on that page, being engaged, is just as important as keeping your resume updated, which is also a huge pet peeve of mine. As I'm looking at other black male nurses. So those are just a couple of pearls of wisdom that I would like to that I often like to talk about with black male nurses like myself.
Awesome. I think everything you said are wonderful pearls. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, into
Right.
nursing, your journey into leadership, all your passions, and a very in depth and detailed description. So I'm sure our listeners will appreciate all the wisdom that you're sharing. Well, folks, this concludes our episode today of You Belong in Here. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in, and we hope that this episode reminds you that your presence is necessary. You truly belong in your places of education and places of work. And as usual, if you found this episode encouraging, motivating, inspiring, or empowering in any way, please like it, subscribe, share it with others. And you can find my podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And tune in 2 weeks for the next episode. We'll continue to explore topics in equity in the workplace and equity in healthcare. Thank you all for listening again, and keep pushing forward.